Good day, health and safety professionals. I'm Simon Bliss, founder and trustee for Safety for Good program and managing director of Principal People, the health and safety recruiters. I'm pleased to welcome you today to our webinar, Why We Must Not Waste This Crisis, and also our panel of contributors. Now, as the worst techie in our business, I've managed to cut off the first part of the introduction. So I'm doing this rather formal entrance to introduce our wonderful panel of contributors. Firstly, I'll welcome back to Safety for Good Tom Oxley, the Tedx speaker and specialist consultant in mental health and the MD of Bamboo Mental Health in the Workplace. He's got such prestigious clients as Cadbury's, Cambridge University and many more. Now, many of you joined us for Tom's presentation at Aviva's training centre in London back in February. Do you remember those wonderful times when we could all get together? And I think that was the time I got stuck in the lift for an hour with my team. Happy days. Anyway, secondly, I'm really pleased to introduce Ruth Denyer. She's Group Risk Director at ITV, and Ruth is a great example of a safety professional that has grown her career to embrace all aspects of risk in her role at ITV. She's also a founding trustee for Safety for Good and actually came up with the name too. So thank you, Ruth, for joining us today. Next, I welcome Darren Bentley, Senior Vice President and Global HSE and Business Continuity Management and Security at DHL. I'm exhausted, that's a huge title. But it's big enough because he does support a DHL and its 450,000 employees who work throughout the globe, serving every country. Finally, I'd like to introduce you to one of my key team, Tara Waterman, as a director at Principal People. She heads up our learning and development program and runs our yearly academy for new entrants. Tara has 13 years experience in recruitment in the UK and Australia and has been absolutely crucial in helping develop our candidate engagement program too. So why must we not waste this crisis is our topic today. And we're adding locking down human behaviour, working from home, coping with the mental health corona coaster, staying alert, stories and case studies from our panel safety leaders. We're thinking about the new normal, positive adaptation for you and your organisation. Anyway, enough of me. Let's join that webinar that I cut the beginning of. Thank you. Yeah, you mentioned something earlier. You're working at home, not working from home.
I'm working, yes, I heard someone say that a while ago, and I thought that's so true because I work from home normally, maybe once a week in normal times, and I have a lovely quiet day that is uninterrupted when everybody hadn't got to grips with video conferencing and when you used to put your head down and actually concentrate on stuff. I'm now working at home at the kitchen table, surrounded by the children's work. They're here, I'm here, and I'm constantly on video calls because everybody's worked out how to do them now.
Yeah, except me, of course. Why everyone's coming in. And if everyone's noticed, the Safety for Good website is in reverse. So well done, Bliss. Darren, can I bring you in now and find out what it's been like for you as heading up the big DHL global network?
Yeah, thank you, Simon, and thank you also for the the opportunity to participate today, and also thanks to the other panel members for coming on here as well. It's very much a mixed bag for me personally. On the basis my safety role is a global role, as you've said. So my normal sort of week by week job is actually in and out of airports literally all over the world really. So for me personally, it's actually a nice change working from home from a personal perspective, because getting to spend more time with my family and getting to spend more time with things to do around the home and stuff. But then when I look at the actual role,
you've frozen a bit. We'll try this again. If Darren's continued to freeze, this might be a good time to bring you in, Tom, and we can come back to Darren. Our man in where are you? In Norwich, isn't it?
No, I was going to tell you a little bit about my situation just for a second. I'm fortunate that I'm set up to work from home, and I've been running quite, as soon as this all everyone started locking down, I started running a lot of sessions helping employers help their people, figure out what's behind what's going on, what are the kind of human behaviors that are going on during this period of lockdown. I'm fortunate that we've got some different working spaces, but I'm really conscious there is such a vast range of experience out there. Some people have got gardens, and some people have got working on the same table as their children, and a lot of the hierarchies are completely different as well. Somebody described it as it's like going to the same restaurant to meet your partner, your lover, your kids for their birthday party. Everything's just, and your business colleagues, everything's just complete muddle at the moment, isn't it? So I think there's a vast range of experiences out there, but we're generally doing okay.
Good. Now, is this a time for you to have a look at those slides?
Let's bring them up. Come on, we've done them now, so we better show them to people.
Okay. There we are. And I don't know what it is about Tom, but he loves a toilet roll. So we'll start, and hopefully you can explain what the hell it is we're trying to do here.
Well, do you all remember when we were looking at the telly, laughing at people for buying toilet roll, and that was before this thing kind of really hit home. People were doing things that looked frankly weird. Maybe I reflect as we've gone through this that maybe they were the early sensitive ones who showed the rest of the people that we needed to act. Maybe they were maybe they were onto something before the rest of us. I mean, society is made up of people who perform that role. And do you know what? I think that health and safety professionals are some of those people as well. I think that you are partly designed to see things before other people do, to make sure that the pack, the tribe is safe, to alert them. And they might roll their eyes before the evidence is in front of their own, but it's true, isn't it? It's important to recognize that you as health and safety professionals were probably onto this in a way that other people were not. I mean, the classic example, isn't it, is sitting there while a fire alarm goes off in a building, and either it's a test or it's not. People go, "Oh, what's all that about?" And they until they've seen a fire, the Bradford City fire or somebody perished, then goodness me, they don't do anything, do they? But it's our role sometimes as health and safety professionals to do that. And then we all started locking down. We went into our caves, didn't we? Bring up the next slide, please, with you, Simon. It comes up in bits. We started doing what our brains are designed to do. Click us through. You see, we've got the first bit of the brain that developed in us was the reptile brain, the lizard brain, and it asks the basic question: Am I safe or not? Okay, and if I don't feel safe, I start to do things, okay, to make me feel safe, whether or not they're appropriate. Okay, this is us going into our cave and sharpening our spears, and it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs would call it, physiological needs, food, water, toilet roll, in fact, and it answers that basic question: Am I safe? That's the reptile brain. And then the next part of our brain that developed was the bit where the mammal brain that said, am I loved? Am I part of the pack, the tribe? Do I belong? Keep clicking for me, Simon. And when we experience the mammal brain, this is also a very important part of our system, of our makeup. So we make sure we're safe, and then we look at am I part of the tribe? Am I part of the pack? And that gives us another set of sensations in the brain. And finally, what can I learn? How can I grow and thrive? Those are the sort of things that are very important for us. The human part of the brain is one that seeks to grow, to change, to learn. And I think that we're all doing that as we go through this process, but we're doing it in very different ways. And in front of you now on the screen is something called the stress curve. Don't worry about all the words for a moment. But what I'd like you to draw your attention to is there's a green zone in the middle, which is us on top of our game, rising to challenges and deadlines and includes problems, okay? And there's 2 red zones on this slide. See the one on the right, which is where we are overwhelmed, where we have too much stimulus, where we have where we feel it's all too much. Sometimes we experience that kind of stress and the anger and the burnout. And I don't need to ask you, I'm sure that you've all experienced time you either put a foot or a couple of feet in the red zone. The other day I found myself literally stamping my feet at my family for one reason or I can't remember the original reason now, but it all became too much. So that's the bit on the right where we get overstimulated, and then there's the bit on the left where we are understimulated. Do you think stress can be caused by understimulation? Certainly can. It's not just the kind of the devil makes work for idle hands. It does. Sometimes when we are bored, we are fidgety at best, but also we can start to feel undervalued, that we're not fulfilled. People on furlough may be experiencing this. And another big one that's happened is about isolation and loneliness that's been happening around this time. You might argue that you might be in a house with other people. It's still possible to feel lonely, even in a house full of people, when people's behaviours and ideas feel different to yours. But perhaps more interesting is there was an experiment done from the University of Chicago in the 1970s, and people were trying to measure their stress, and in doing so they measured their heart rate, and they spat into a tube to measure the cortisol, which is the stress hormone that is released by the reptile brain when we're not safe. They measured that, and they realized that feelings of stress could come about as much with loneliness and isolation, being away from the pack, away from the tribe, away from your family, as they could do from being attacked in the street by a stranger. So sometimes I think we think of stress and trauma as a single event, a thing that's happened, and therefore I must feel a certain way. But actually it can be a lot more subtle than that, and it can creep in over time. So all these things are currently at play with us. This is a dynamic model, if you like. I have days where I am in all these categories. We don't just stay in one place. Mental health goes up and down all the time. Give it one more click, would you, Simon? Just one. I want to just point out a few of the things that people have been talking about when we have these sessions. Look at the things on the right there. You've got a lot of change in the air. I mean unimaginable global change, from pandemic to race-related social media stuff that's affecting a lot of people. We've got spotlight on media in government. We've got that lack of sense of control. We've got all our support systems are up in the air. Relationships, well, I think lockdown is shining a light on some of those. And then our demands, well, they are, we're trying to figure out what we can do. As Ruth said, I'm not working from home. I'm at home during a crisis, trying my bloody best to try and get some work done. And in amongst that, all our hierarchies and our roles have changed as well. So give it one more click. Those of you who know your way around the stress management standards will recognise that they're from the Health and Safety Executive. So we've got things like control and support and all those things are completely up in the air. So what does that mean to us in terms of journey? Well, I've got something called the dear old change curve. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross designed this at the end of the 60s to talk about grief. And I want to be clear here that I use this grief, the sense of grief, in a loose term in some ways and very specifically in others. When we go through a traumatic time, or an incident or a series of things that can create difficulties and have a big effect on us physically and emotionally, we go through a number of different sort of emotional stages. First of all, so we deny it, and then we kind of realize that, oh my goodness, this virus, this pandemic, it really is happening, and it's happening in my country, in my county, on my street, my postcode, and then we sometimes hit anger about it. We sometimes pretend it's not there, but sometimes we choose somebody to blame. Been seeing a bit of that recently, haven't we, in the news? And then at some point when things actually seem quite difficult and desperate, we hit the bottom, and we kind of let go. It's after that point when we let go, we begin to kind of start searching for new ways through this, new ways around it, understanding different ways of working and that sort of thing, and we can optimize and adapt and put some changes into place. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some very kind of jaunty emoticons on this. The stress, the change curve is one where we're moving around it all the time as well. So don't feel that you're doing right or wrong for any particular place on this. But what I would say is that it's up to us as health and safety people to work our way through this probably quicker than others, so we can guide them to understand the meaning of change, to make them feel safe, and then to work out how to adapt and improve to our situation. So I think there's 3 more little things to click up on this one, Simon.
And before we do that, I'm mindful of time, and I want to try and cover as many points as possible. And we cut Darren off, so we can come back to Darren. You were midway through before the Tinternet did some terrible things to your Wi-Fi. So can you come back in? And also, I'd like to know, if you're looking at this graph, where you are in this graph at the moment, Darren. Are you in 1, or are you in 7, or somewhere in between?
Okay, I'm not sure how much I covered or was frozen, so I'll be brief and Simon on this. I guess in terms of the question, as I mentioned, from a personal point of view, none of us obviously have experienced this. So whilst it's great to have this graph here, and I can understand the psychology around it. The facts are, none of us know how we're going to react. None of us know how we're going to be impacted by this, personally, individually, organisationally. But what we do know, as we travel this journey, that we're learning. We're learning about ourselves. We're learning about our organisations. We're learning about our colleagues, friends, family. It is, a new learning experience, and bringing it onto a personal and a business perspective. There will be silver linings for sure. From a business perspective, from a personal perspective. And I think that's really important to focus on the positives. Not just, trying to be glass half full, but from an opportunity to get something out of this crisis, for the long-term good. So on the journey here, without trying to sit on the fence, it's all of them. I've experienced all of these really personally, I think, and from an organisational point of view, and will continue to do so. It's hard to say what stage is specifically at, because as Tom was saying, it changes day to day, week to week. So that's like I say, very quick sort of perspective from my point of view, Simon.
Okay, Ruth, can you unmute? And then I'd like to sort of know where you are on this journey, on the current.
I've just been looking at it, thinking about it, and I feel like I'm in a constant loop of number 6 now. So I feel like we've gone through broadly with this situation, the Resistance Act, all those pieces, but then it's changing all the time. So you're in this constant loop of understanding the meaning of change and basically going round and round, because every day things are changing and we are learning more and we are dealing with more. So some primary school year groups go back. In your personal life, you're dealing with that. There's a new regulation written that you're dealing with. There's a new, maybe the pandemic wave is going to change in one of the countries you operate in. So I think you're in that 6th place all the time, which means you're kind of going backwards and forwards through this. But in different parts of your life at different times. And I think that's what makes it such a challenging, exciting, all those things moment, is that you're dealing with all this at a pace that I don't think any of us have ever experienced. So you can go through this whole curve in 15 minutes every day, and you're going through it in the background all the way through. But number 6 to me says what life is like at the moment, constantly.
No, thank you for that. Tara, you've got a couple of roles at Principal People. Learning and Development Director is one, and you're responsible for the well-being and welfare of the team. I might ask you where you are at the moment on this graph, and perhaps a bit of a reflection of how it's affected us.
Yeah, I think I would really mirror what you've said, Ruth, about being in that constant loop. I think we have so many challenges that we're facing, and we've all alluded to it, but at home behind closed doors, you know, everyone is working with their husbands and wives at the moment, and children, and that in of itself is incredibly stressful, and realizing that it's exactly the same for your team. So I think from a well-being of your team point of view, I think it's really difficult to get people to open up and talk about it, because actually, especially in the health and safety industry, what I've seen in the candidates that I speak to is no one wants to admit really that they're finding it really tough, because they're supposed to be the people that people look to as a pioneer for mental well-being in some organizations. So people don't want to say, actually, you know what, this is really hard, and I've had a really tough night, and I've been logged on till midnight, up with my kids all night, and I've got a to-do list coming through my toes. People don't want to say it. And so I think getting under the skin of how people are feeling at the moment while coping with it on your own as well, I think is incredibly challenging for leaders across the globe.
Okay, well, thank you, Tara. Tom, shall I take us through the next slide? You were pushing me to do that. Are we ready?
Yeah, well, listen, I just wanted to put on here, this is the human brain working normally for us to move around this slide, right? The bit where we go, oh my God, what's happening? You know, and make yourself, that's the bit where we go, am I safe? What, 2 more clicks for me, Simon? Just 2.
Yeah, it's misbehaving, as technology sometimes does.
That's all right. And then we try and figure out, do I belong and what can I learn? Don't worry, Simon. Simon, but probably best, Simon, for me to feel safe, Simon, just if you just take your hand away. So Tara was absolutely onto something quite relevant here on my next slide, which is about, this is a piece of research done by, but in social care, where they tried to figure out what teams wanted from their managers during difficult times. And look at the type of words on there. This is not a how-to guide. This is not a framework. This is just, you know, what some research said, came out of the University of East Anglia, and I can reference that if anybody's interested. The team is a secure base. We need to feel safe before we can function. So what Darren was saying is that when this is new, when it's changing all the time, that is not easy for people to feel kind of safe and loved and therefore be at their best. So a lot of our role as managers or as leaders in an organization is trying to create that atmosphere where I, as an individual, you know, I wouldn't choose my family to be my colleagues, but there they are. You know, I don't want to be shouty and angry, but there those feelings are. You know, and I think when it looks, I think these words will feel quote unquote soft for some people, but actually they're really important. If you have people who are feeling anxious and nervous and sensitive and full of change and difficult relationships, and you start barking at them to behave in a way that doesn't give them space for their understanding, then you're going to end up with lots of little clashes. If you can try and find out among your team, among your household, among your leadership peer group, what type of feelings are there, you begin to do that listening piece, that consultation that the health and safety executive like, that, you know, you begin to listen to and find some of the answers to this, because everybody is going to be pretty different. One more click, Simon, I'm going to allow you one more click, and then I work with Cadbury, and other people use this as well. They have a one-to-one meeting agenda that's the same across the organization. Me, us, it. So if I go and see Ruth, my manager, and Ruth asks me about me, and I can talk about my stuff, my kid in a paddling pool, or grandma in a care home, or whatever it might be. And then I talk about us, which is the organization and the team. And then I talk about it, which is, okay, right, what have you got on today? I think we're very quick in our conversations to go, how are you, Simon? I'm fine. How are you, Tom? I'm fine. And we kind of do that table tennis thing. We don't get anywhere. But then we go into, right, so what have you got on this week? And we miss all the stuff that as humans we really need to help us understand just where the hell we are in that moment today as a result of the sleep I got or didn't get last night. And half the people out there haven't got the right amount of sleep anyway. It's illegal under the Geneva Convention, but we don't talk about this stuff. And I think it's really important that if we're going to get it right in the big scale, we need to get these smaller conversations right in the little scale.
Okay. Do I need to click any more, or is that it, sir?
Well, we can come back to my slides if you want some more slides later.
Wonderful. Okay. Is there any of the panel want to add anything to that, especially that last? I thought those last little post-it note was quite useful, because I think Tara, you initiated the one-to-one meetings, didn't you, every week with managers and their teams, and made sure that we spent a good deal of time on the me thing, and not jumped into, right, what's going on in the business and what have we got to do today.
Absolutely. But I think also I read something really interesting quite early on in the lockdown, that catching someone on the hop, as you would, a quick meeting in the hallway that we used to have, is now a video conference, and it can be so intrusive. I think, Ruth, as you said it earlier, people are now, you used to work from home in relative peace, and now people want to video you to just have a quick chat about something small. So I think weekly one-to-ones are still essential, and also monthly development plan meetings, that your staff still feel that they're moving forward despite the kind of pause that this has put on many things, that they still feel they're able to develop. But I think it's trying to get the balance right between supporting them and not actually intruding, which I think we'll come on to. It's one of our questions.
Yeah. I've got some, we did ask attendees to send some questions in advance, and we had 90 or 100 or something, and thank you all of you for presenting those. We chose 10 because a lot of them were very, very similar, and I'm just going to read a few of those out now to the panel, and perhaps pick a couple for individuals. Darren, I'm going to pick on you for the first one. It was a good question, and I'll read it word for word. Horizon scanning the future of the new way of working is essential that our businesses thrive for the better. Home working has become a new normal, replacing the habit of going into the office. But what has the impact been on the family household and their mental well-being? We sort of covered this a bit, but
yeah, we did. We did I guess, again, two dimensions, Simon, if I may. First of all, from a personal perspective, I mentioned that, most of my working life, I'm on the road, quite a lot in the nature of my roles. So actually, being home, for people used to be working home, there's been an adjustment for everyone, and in the sense of learning how to live with each other, because, for the best part of the last 10 years, that's not been the case in the sense of my role. So that, as Tom was saying, that does bring genuine, new challenges in terms of, stress, strains, but also the good points as well. From an organisational perspective, clearly, obviously, we're all individuals and we all cope in different ways. Now, I've heard some fantastic positive stories about home working and how it's got them closer to their loved ones. They've become closer as a team because they're using technology to connect more regularly. And I think that's been a theme, certainly in my organisation, that, because we're all using technology at home, we're actually talking more as, a byproduct of that, which again has been positive. And in the sense of getting things done, we've been able to concentrate on less, probably more important things through this experience. And what we've learned critically is actually by focusing on, day by day, week by week, on critical aspects that we need to get in place. Actually, we've shifted the needle on quite a lot, actually, in this new world. So that's just, again, a snippet from my experience, Simon.
Tom, did you want to add anything to that? Because I guess you've seen in your community some different challenges.
Yeah.
Or experiences.
Yeah, there's I can't say this enough. There's a big spectrum of experiences, and it's important that you ask your team what's going on there and try and spot the themes. But those of early data published in the Lancet, even before our lockdown, in the medical mag, the Lancet was talking about people in China. 28% of households experience sort of poor mental health, especially those with children. And I, there are all sorts of things at play here, but balancing homeschooling and that sort of thing. But it's not just children. We've all got our worries set, and we just choose from them when we become alert to worry more generally. And there's a thing out there called a decreased frustration tolerance, which is I guess a bit of a psychoanalyst word for being pissed off more easily. That sort of thing is, when there's big pandemics out there and stuff like that, it nibbles away at our patience, and that we're going to be our best version of ourselves for our colleague and our work. But with our family, we sometimes, we might let it slip a bit more. We might relax a bit more and not behave, quite as generously as we would do. Partly because our home that was our chill out zone is now our working zone. That's our pressure zone again as well.
I've got a question for Ruth. And actually, I'm probably going to ask a couple of you to comment on this. Any advice on managing staff expectations of flexible working options for different roles? For example, a finance or HR colleague may be able to work from home 100% of the time, but a supported housing officer needs to be based in a physical work location where their clients are based. We want to avoid any feeling of mistreatment in these frontline teams and animosity towards other staff. Now that might be interesting with regard to some of your frontline teams, and I was thinking particularly of Darren and Ruth to answer this one. But Ruth, do you want to go first?
I think it goes back to a phrase that we have used and I have used so many times in the past 12 weeks. It's going to be case by case, and we have to make people realise that and support them in realising that, and be that what people we need boots on the ground at certain points in time, what measures we can put in place, what we can do in different countries, what we're able to bring back quicker than other things. I think, and this is what's interesting as a safety person, is so much of this is going to be down to risk assessment, and so much is going to be down to what we can do from home and what we can't do from home. And it goes back to managing risk and doing a risk assessment and treating every situation case by case. I think from my personal view is being as transparent as possible is really, really important. So being able to explain in a coherent and sensible way why you're making the decisions you're making is the way people understand what decisions are being made about where roles need to be done and where the flexibility can be and where it can't be. And it will go back to that saying, it will be case by case. And I think that's really, really important. And it plays to all that we know in health and safety and kind of risk assessment, is it will be on a case by case basis. So my answer would be around that, but also absolutely transparency and clear, coherent communication with the business and with teams.
Okay, thank you. Darren, anything to add?
I echo what Ruth said in terms of case by case for sure, but also, again, coming back to silver linings, there will be roles that we perceived weren't able to be worked effectively from home, and we are quickly finding out that's not the case. And conversely, where people have been working from home, actually the benefits of coming into contact with people on the ground, boots on the ground, you say, Simon, have been underestimated, and we need to encourage more of. So, in the voyage of discovery, as we are finding out now, individual roles, individual disciplines within our organisations, including safety, will definitely going to have, different approaches You know, and I think overall that will be a positive learning experience from COVID in a sense of, you know, what is the art of the possible, you know, in whatever the new norm may be.
Yeah. Next question, good question. How do we incorporate the positives from home working into employees' wellbeing plans when they return to the workplace? And I guess, so perhaps Tara and Tom, if you, Tara, ladies first, how would we do that? Or how will organisations do that?
Yeah, I think, as Ruth has said, it is a case-by-case basis. We at Principal People are working with other of the businesses in our group in other countries to try and share knowledge and experience of what we think we can offer moving forward. But I think this is a real opportunity. As you've just said there, Darren, there's so many individuals across health and safety who thought it'd be impossible to fulfill roles effectively from home, and they are proving them wrong. So I think this is a real opportunity to retain and attract great entrants to the market and people who are already in health and safety, and giving that flexibility and balance, because health and safety can be an incredibly pressured role to work in under normal circumstances anyway. And I hear a lot of candidates talking about a lack of work-life balance and strain on their interpersonal relationships at home. And this is a real opportunity to allow a bit more room for flexibility. So I think it's important to share experiences across businesses and be open-minded. I think from both sides, you know, the employees need to be open-minded, as do employers, about what's appropriate, what works. And I think it's not this is the way it's going to be just forever. I think it will be fluid, and things will need to be trialed and measure the success of that through output.
Tom, anything to add? What are your clients?
Yeah. My top tip here is that it's brilliant that you've got wellbeing plans, and well done for that. So that must mean you're having conversations around that, and that's good. But all those things are nothing unless the leadership team and the managers are showing, not just telling people, but showing people that it's okay to make the changes, to keep the good stuff, to stagger your commute, to make the most of lunch hour, to work from home one day a week, whatever it is, and absolutely give permission through the organisation for that to happen. That's a cultural thing, and it's worth its weight in gold.
Okay, thank you for that. One more. How can employees effectively monitor the mental health of how can employers effectively monitor the mental health of employees working remotely without them feeling that the employers are being intrusive? And how often should monitoring take place? I wonder if actually Tara and Tom, you could give me a shout on that. And again, I'm going to go ladies first. Sorry, Tom.
Okay, no problem. Well, as I said earlier, I read that really useful piece of context that it gave to all leaders to call by mobile, you know, have a quick catch up, don't demand a video conference. I think for me as a leader, I'm really conscious at the moment that, Ruth, as you've said, my workload is more demanding than it has been. I'm incredibly busy, and I think everyone that I speak to is exactly the same. And it's making sure that my team feel completely underpinned. So for me, I ask my team for feedback on whether the support that I'm giving them is enough. What do they need more or less of from me? And I'm trying to encourage that real, those really honest conversations. As I said earlier, I think weekly one-to-ones are still vital, as are their monthly development reviews. I think outside of that, again, it is case by case. I speak with some that are catching up with their team quite formally 3 times a day. Some employees find that too much, and it is verging on intrusive. I think it's striking that balance, showing that you trust your employees as well, that you're there when you need them, but you trust them to be autonomous. But I think what we've seen is that some individuals feel that they want a lot more support than they used to when they saw their leader every day. And I think for health and safety professionals, what's on their agenda is so much more complex now and challenging, and they're vulnerable because actually they don't know the answer. I think, Ruth, you've said that in our previous conversations. So I think they need to feel completely supported, and they might need a bit more attention, whereas you've got somebody else who's working from home incredibly well, quite happy to catch up with you twice a week. I think again it is case by case, and seeking that feedback frequently.
Okay, Tom, anything?
Tara's said a lot of it for the manager and the individual. It's brilliant. When you're having those catch-up meetings, one of the best ways to conclude that is, when do you fancy catching up again? And they'll soon tell you, to sling your hook for a week, or to arrange it, if they're feeling jittery. Your energy is best spent on the people who really need it. Remember, very roughly speaking, about a third of people will maybe having a difficult time, 30 to 40% of people. Most people will be mostly okay, and some people will be thriving. So concentrate your energies on people who really need you, and then have a system. Organizationally, you could get in touch with your people and run surveys. That's quite a good thing. I would be very sparing with those. Literally, one every kind of 6 months or so as we go through this would be adequate. It's like if you start to try and lose weight and you're on the scales every day, it doesn't help anybody. But if you really want to kind of see the changes over a period of time, and the things that you've done and what support people need, and the changing requirements of your organization, then staff surveys, confidential, every 6 months or so might be a good benchmark for your organization.
Okay, thank you. I've got one for our two professionals, safety professionals here. How do you share well-being mental health resources across a global organization with so many variables in each country? So I'm going to be politically incorrect and go to Darren first, and then Ruth. Darren. Okay,
thanks, Simon. So, clearly spanning many geographies and legislation and regulatory landscapes, we have to be mindful of that. But the way that my organisation approach it is through a global framework of well-being, and each of the geographies and countries then will develop what we call a tier 2 level to that framework, and using the principles. We've got 4 principles: education, awareness, prevention and screening, disease and condition, and behavioural modification. And that framework is deployed. The countries will adapt those principles and tools, and then obviously where it's needed most, where that connects then to our colleagues on the ground. And that works, very effectively. And that's the way, from a global organisational perspective, we strategize that.
Thank you, Darren. Ruth, over to you.
I would absolutely echo what Darren said. I would say, by the way, Simon, it's probably politically correct to do Darren first sometimes, not politically incorrect. So
That's
well done. Anyway, but aside from that, I would say that it's principles. If you can base your approach on principles that you then adopt within country in the way that suits those people in that organisation and the legal framework, it's very similar to safety at the end of the day. The well-being, the mental health, all those pieces. It's that a global business, you have to have principles and a framework that you then adopt and put in place in the local territory.
Okay. No, thank you for that. I'm going to go to one last question. Here we go. I've had a few members of staff contact health and safety function regarding anxiety while working from home. How can we help them with cope, and what pointers can we give them to help themselves? Now I'm going to throw that one at Tom. That would be
So my answer to that would be, how would you have answered that before the pandemic? Are there mental health first aiders? Is there an employee assistance program? Is there somebody in HR who's got specialist training? Anxiety is quite, in a sense, tricky. I think people are. It can be very distressing for the people who experience it, because it doesn't sometimes have a specific and set cause. Because of that, my personal feeling is to advise anybody, any manager, don't try and be a half-assed therapist about this. If somebody's experienced anxiety that's getting in the way of their life, then it's really important that they try and seek some therapeutic support. Now, some people who experience anxiety don't particularly want that. They may have coping strategies that they use, and seeing a therapist might start to threaten taking those away. So if you really haven't got anywhere for people to go, then just to listen to them and ask about how it feels when it crops up, those sorts of things. Just the listening bit. Don't try and fix it or solve it or transform it. Just hear people out. That is biologically a really helpful thing to do, and from a safety point of view, you're not getting into territory that could be hazardous. So mental health first aiders, employee assistants, wellbeing team, if not charities, their GP, those sorts of places, and therapeutic support will be the places to go with that. You may also want to put something in place for your team if they are being exposed to a lot of stories on this subject, because it can be pretty difficult to hear as well.
Thank you. And I sort of want to move that sort of brings us forward to think about, as we come out of or as we move through the pandemic and the new ways of working, what positives can we take, and what coping mechanisms, what positives can we take out of this this situation and the challenges that we're now facing. And I just wanted to ask you in turn if for your view on that. I'm pleased to say we're getting some from our attendees as well, and our ambassadors wrote some before, so if I don't get time to read those out, I'll certainly share them all, and the ones that our attendees will be writing shortly. So have you got one positive you could take from this that you will either use personally or communicate to your organisation and take forward with your team? And why not, Darren, you go first, please.
Yeah, I think the very nature of what we're doing here, Simon, connectivity and connecting with people, and Tom and Ruth and Tara's talked about this extensively as well, in the sense of not underestimating the power of connectivity, both virtually and physically. And the silver lining, I've mentioned that a few times now, for us is we're a people business, like most organisations. We need to be connected. We need to feel part of the organisation, and so post-COVID, keeping that level of connectivity for us is of paramount importance, because it's actually what's got us through the crisis so far, and we're going to really build on that and strengthen that in our organisation going forward. Thank you.
Tara?
I think it's an appreciation, to be completely honest. I think appreciation for the lives that we live, our roles, our people, our mental well-being, and making time for all of those. So I think that's what I've taken away from it, and really hope to keep in the front of my mind as we move forward.
Ruth, how about you?
I think my big thing would actually be similar to Darren's, in that I think the power of sharing has really come across. So I've noticed that being physically spaced apart hasn't actually stopped people sharing and pulling together. And as sectors, as industries, as professionals across a global business, we've noticed there's a lot more. It's easier to pull people together because you're not physically having a meeting in a meeting room anywhere. So actually, you in a way feel closer to everybody because nobody's in a room together. And that sounds like a very odd juxtaposition, and you'd have never thought like that before, but actually in a way it's much more equal for all of us, that we're all meeting in this very odd way on screen. Because it used to be you'd have a couple of people on screen in a meeting room full of people, and they'd always be the people who are removed from it. Now we're all in the same place, and that is enabling this kind of sharing and this ability to really feel on a par with everyone. And I think there's something to be, I don't always want to spend my life, I quite like meeting people face to face, but I think we should take away that there is something that is leveling about everybody being in the same place together.
Thank you. Thank you. Tom, how about you, sir?
my feelings about this is that out of the kind of the grief and the change and the trauma that has gone, we will pass through it, and out of grief and change also comes growth and opportunity. 60% of people who experience kind of clinical trauma also experience growth, as long as that conversation is facilitated, as long as they're listened to, as long as they're believed, and as long as they can feel some changes happening as a result of that. For me, that's a big focus on self-care and looking after myself. And I suspect you, as safety people, I'm going to have a guess here, but I think you're probably way too far down your own to-do list in terms of self-care. And I really think that you ought to be promoted up that do list, because that's how you serve other people best. But also out of this is the fact that you've had a light shine on your talents. You may have discovered things that you didn't know were there. Maybe other people saw things that you knew were there, but nobody bloody listened before. And so there are opportunities for you to do that, so long as you do that not at your own expense, right? Don't burn out on this. Keep going, but definitely practice that self-care, and then you have that kind of growth and opportunity and the human brain stuff that you're all absolutely capable of, as long as it's nicely facilitated.
Good, thank you. I'm just going to read a couple of the positives that were contributed by some of our attendees. One here is from Tim Eldridge, who some of you know, Global Head at HSBC. The recognition by boards and senior managers of the significant value of the health and safety profession in supporting organisations in a crisis. But now we need to ensure this is extended at all times. And thank you for that, Tim. Darren, we had a discussion a week or so ago about actually your workload significantly increased because you got dumped the business continuity lead, didn't you, for the business? Can you share a little bit of that? But I'm not asking to patronize you a little bit, but I think it's a great example about how the C-suite looked at safety and said these guys could help us through. So if you could just share a little bit of that.
Yeah, sure. Well, we as part of my safety team across the globe, we also have responsibility for business continuity management. So we was the natural place to come to. Having said that, though, as we've all said, you come prepare obviously for this type of crisis, and we run like lots of desktops on different types of pandemics, etc. But I think it's fair to say that this particular crisis has caught everyone, by surprise, I guess. So we head up a global crisis management team. On there are our senior board members and functional leaders across the globe, and like probably most organisations on this call, in many ways we knew certain aspects what we had to do, but there are many that we've just been learning along the way, and some of that are clearly. We've got right, not all of it, because that's not humanly possible, I guess. But what it's done for the safety team and the BCN team, I think there's a good recognition there before, in fairness, but it's really propelled us into an extremely well thought of value-adding function that I think the business through this crisis has underlined its importance to our supply chain resilience and our customers, and the team can take a lot of pride from that. We're not through it obviously yet by a long way, but they've shown their capabilities to the organisation when they've needed it most.
Good. Thank you for that. I've got a couple more. This is from Damien Mulcrone. One of our ambassadors on Safety for Good. One positive, a crisis provides a single focal point for an organisation to focus on, which enables really effective cross-functional teamwork. It's not sustainable long-term, but the lesson for me is to pick 3 or 4 key issues only at a given time, to focus on these. The likelihood of success is far greater when the mission is crystal clear. I'll give you a couple more. Rachel Butler from the Northeast, a more flexible and remote way in which we work through technology, a better, more greener environment with less travel pollution, many more wanting to walk, cycle to work. And before all of this, mental health was a fairly taboo subject, but thanks to you guys, it's been raised significantly. And now it seems the norm that we ask each other if we're okay. It will change the way in which we view mental health for the better. I've got one more. One positive for us is from Julie Westcott from DS Smith, the global packaging manufacturer. As key workers continue to produce throughout the pandemic, there's been the commitment, energy and determined focus of our teams to come to work, continue to supply, to comply with strict COVID-19 guidelines, but also to support each other. In fact, in April, we had our best ever health and safety monthly result, mainly due to people being more aware of their surroundings because they were looking to ensure that they kept up the 2 metre rule. We now need to work in turn to turn this into a habit for the future. Ruth, you talk, when we talk about the 2 metre rule, I remember you saying it's difficult for organisations that work globally, and Darren, you might come in here because we have a 2 metre rule here, I think, and you spotted that in Germany it's 1.5 metres, and the World Health Organization says it's metres. So I can imagine with your teams working globally, and Darren in goodness knows 200 countries or whatever, that's pretty challenging to make sure that processes work.
I think the thing is with this, Simon, it's with a lot of stuff, it's this global principles. It is about social distancing. It's just the exact distance that is set in different countries is different. And I think where we work in global businesses, yes, it's challenging, but those kind of idiosyncrasies are embedded in more or less everything we do, I would say. So it would be much more simple if it was one answer for everybody, but it never is with anything that we look at. And just to share for us what we've learned about the systems we've built over the last few years is what I've seen through this is the capacity to have systems that change and that can flex and add information to get information out to people is so important. And it's maybe something we didn't really focus on when we were building systems before. And as a safety management system, the ability for that to scale and change and adapt has been really, really important, and maybe is something we should come out of this focusing more on is flexibility and capacity than kind of going round loops of versions and issues and all the different things we maybe did 15 years ago.
Yeah, we're getting some really good ideas from everyone. So I will publish those. I can save them all, and they can go out on the Principal People website and the Safety for Good website next week. Mm-hmm. I'm going to, have you got any one sentence finishers panel for today or guidance for the future? On my screen, Tom, you're at the bottom. So I'm going to start with you and we're going to work up. So Tom, take it away.
Yeah, listen to your staff. Listen to it. It doesn't matter if you're on a farm or a construction site. You know, they'll have ideas that you haven't thought of, and their lived experience is really important to how you're going to figure out delivering the business needs. So listen to your staff. Honestly, listen. Listening is the best medicine.
Thank you. Wonderful, Darren.
You probably guess what I'm going to say, Simon. But there's a silver lining in every experience. You just have to look for it. And certainly for this crisis, we will experience them, and let's really grab those with both hands.
Yeah, well said. Tara?
I think mine would just be a little bit on the mental health side. I think trying to force yourself to, you know, it used to be when you're at work, you're 100% at work. When you're at home, you're 100% at home. They're blended. I think try and force yourself to time block. So if your day is running from 7 a.m. till 10 p.m. at work, you know, block an hour that you're going to give to your children, focusing entirely on them without your mobile or your laptop, and vice versa. If you've got something at work, block that time out where you're completely focused. And I think you block out times when there might be once a week you'll be in bed reading a book by 10 p.m. because, as Tom said, looking after yourself through this time is right at the bottom of that list, and it probably couldn't be more important than it is right now.
Ruth?
I think mine combines all of those in that I think this is a moment of amazing opportunity, but it's at a moment when managing everything is very challenging for everybody. So allow yourself not to do everything perfectly sometimes, but also be aware that it is a really challenging time, but don't lose sight that there are opportunities that we can take and grab. But don't expect to be superhuman.
No, well, thank you all. And thank you for all the attendees that have connected with the Zoom. The juggling of the technology has been a big challenge for me. As you can see, those of you that joined late, with my Safety for Good background, I know it's in reverse, but for me, it's perfect. It's the right way around. So next time I do one of these, I'm doing one tomorrow. I'm sort of plugging my own. I'm interviewing Andrew Sharman, the president of IOSH, tomorrow, and challenging him with some questions. And I better sort out my Safety for Good website backdrop before then. So that will be published next week. We're going to do a few more of these with other panels, and I may invite Tom back again, because I'm concerned about people that are in furlough, and we didn't really cover that today. And that's affecting a lot of safety people, certainly from some of the sectors that are quite significantly damaged. And Tara's and I have had discussions with lots of candidates who are A, furloughed, B, in redundancy programs, or very insecure about their futures. So we'll be running some more programs for that. But thank you all. Thank my panel. You've been brilliant. And thank you all attendees for listening in for such a long period of time. And hope to see you all soon, and keep safe. Thank you. Well, didn't they do a great job? Real thanks to the contributors, and also to all you attendees too. One thing that didn't work so well, apart from my tech recording, of course, which I'd like to resolve, is getting your ideas about the one positive thing that you can take from this current Corona Coaster experience, and that you're going to take forward for the future. Now, I asked for your ideas to put in the chat box, but it was a bit of a curveball. And so please send your one idea to info@safetyforgood.com or info@principalpeople.co.uk. And we'll share all of those on our website with a copy of the webinar video too. Many thanks to all our ambassadors who shared your own positives. I read some of these out on the webinar, but we'll put all those on the website too for you to see. Many thanks for attending or viewing the video. We'll bring you more topics soon from the program. I have an interview coming up with Dr. Andrew Sharman, president of IOSH, and I'm very proud to say a Safety for Good ambassador too. Keep a lookout on the Safety for Good website for this soon. Thank you. Bye for now.